Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I want to film a video. I've been wanting to film this for a while. I first saw this video concept on TikTok from My Name is Marines. She had a TikTok about books that haunt her. And the idea is that if, maybe we don't want to really talk about or recommend or even read like super scary books, but there are books that have either just like got into our mind and heart and stay there forever, or there's something about them that is like haunting that makes us like not forget them, or a scene that really affected us, or even like a vibe. So that's what I have today. I have 10 books. And these are books that haunt me because I just can never forget about them. There are scenes in this book that I remember so vividly still to this day that just have had such an impact on me that they will literally never ever leave me. So some of these are romance, some of them are not, but these are all books that have had a huge impact on me and my life and my reading. So the first book that I want to talk about is Dark Needs at Night's Edge. So this is a very popular paranormal romance series by Kresley Cole. It is fantastic. It is slightly bonkers. It's very high heat, but it's also deeply, deeply emotional. And I really love what she does with her character dynamics in the relationship. And one thing especially that I love these books about is how the men are just completely head over heels for the women, like gone, fated mates concepts. Like these books are just so fun. And just very fast-paced and just enjoyable to read. This book particularly sticks out to me because this is about a vampire hero and a ghost heroine who used to be a ballerina. The vampire is sort of gone rogue, and so he's being very dangerous, so his friends, vampire friends, take him to this haunted mansion where Naomi, the heroine, lives. I always say her name wrong. Okay, Naomi, yes, that's what it is. It's like, I always either say Naomi or Noemi. It's Naomi, I'm pretty sure, but that's what it says on the back. Anyway, so his friends take him to this haunted mansion and they basically like chain him up. And Naomi, the ghost, is there. She's watching. She's very, very drawn to him. And they have this beautiful romance. And I think that's what really sets this book apart for me, is how beautiful and just absolutely emotive that their relationship is. Like the longing that they both feel for one another. Like she wants to be alive so she can be with him, and he wants her so badly, and it's just so beautiful. Like the whole question of how are they going to be together, how are they going to get happily ever after, was always in my brain, and I think that has a part to do with why this is such a haunting book for me. But the thing that really gets me with this book is when Conrad, the hero, Naomi is in danger and he can't get to her, and he is so afraid that she is going to just be obliterated, completely just snuffed out. Her spirit is going to be gone, that he's never going to see her again. And when he calls out for her, like he calls out her name, like, it will never ever leave me. It's so beautiful. This book is a little bit heartbreaking. It is definitely steamy, but it is just so lovely and romantic, and I just adore it. So this book definitely is never going to leave my brain. So switching gears a little bit, let's see, we'll go with this one next, is a sci-fi book, The Fifth Season. This is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, and this is actually the first book that I've read by her. This book was hugely popular on BookTube several years ago and on Bookstagram, and that's actually when I read it. It's been several years since I read it. And I really didn't know what to expect with this book, other than I heard so many people rave about it. So I was just like, okay, I'll give it a try. You know, like I tend to do that if a book is getting a lot of traction, if people are talking about it. I want to see it and experience it for myself. And this book absolutely didn't let me down. It was so fascinating, beautifully written. Like seriously, the writing in this is so good. It's so tactile. It's so emotional without going into melodrama like at all. There's a lot of brevity to the sentences, and her words are chosen very deliberately and used with power. And I just loved the characters in here. And this is one of the most unique points of view that I've ever read. I've never actually read another book that uses second person point of view, and it's not written entirely in second person. It's only the present day parts that are. It's told in alternating past, what happened in the past, and what's happening in the future. The whole premise of this is that it's basically a dystopian world, and there are things that are happening within the earth that are causing these big dystopian events that is sort of like wiping out certain parts of the population, and then a new time period is emerging. This is also the first polyamorous relationship that I ever read in fiction. And this book starts out with a bang, like a huge bang. There's a trigger warning for child loss. That's what is the catalyst for the heroine to start moving forward and trying to find answers and trying to find justice for her very, very young child who was killed by her partner at that time. So that could be very triggering for a lot of readers, and honestly, it was definitely difficult to read. This book surprised me. This book filled me with emotion, and the specific thing that haunts me about this is the way that this mother was relentless in seeking justice for her child who had passed away, and also in finding her other child who is still alive. She's trying to connect with them. But also there was a part of the romantic relationship in here that was haunting to me, although like this is definitely not a romance. It ends tragically. But watching them love each other and watching her try to move on while still carrying this burden, this weight of wanting to find justice for her child, it just was fascinating. Like every single thing about this book haunts me to this day. And it has haunted me so much that even though I've read this several years ago, I never finished the series because like I know the pain that is in here, but I also like feel like my heart and mind has to be prepared to move on. But this is one of the best books I have ever read, and I would say the sci-fi elements in this are very light. Like there's no spaceships, there's nothing like that. But the characters are so deeply human. They're flawed, but they're also triumphant, and it was just a freaking masterpiece. It did win the Hugo Award in 2016, and like for good reason. This is one of the best books, period, that I have ever read in my life. It's so good. Okay, so carrying along with books that are tragic and like leave you with a gut punch, and for me, like I don't often cry in books. To be honest, I could count maybe 2 books that I have cried over in my entire life, and this is one of them, and it is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. So a lot of people have maybe read this already. This is actually a middle grade book. It has won some awards. I can't read what they are, but this book was short. It's illustrated, you know, pretty hauntingly illustrated. I feel like most people have heard about this, but if you want a book about grief, sometimes I go through periods where I want to read books about grief. I don't really know why. I just sort of want to maybe explore that or experience that through somebody else's eyes, and there are very few authors that I would trust to tackle such a heavy concept. And I think that Patrick Ness did it to perfection here. This is basically I don't know that you could call it an allegory, but it's about a boy who is really struggling, and his mother is ill and dying, and he ends up having this monster visit him who sort of doesn't necessarily coach him, but kind of guides him through this grief process. And at the end, you get to see what the monster actually means and what is revealed. And this book goes through the young boy's experience, everything that he feels in the grieving process. Even though his mother is alive, you know that she's dying and she's not going to always be there. And you feel his anger and his rage and his hurt and his fear. And, you know, like this is the type of book that I enjoy a lot because it handles all of those emotions, all of those very human emotions in a spectacularly, incredibly talented way, so that you feel all of them. You feel so much for the little boy. You feel so much for what he's going through. And you also get to experience his emotions as well. It just was such a masterpiece. And I think that if there's one book on this whole list of books that haunt me that I would recommend, it would be this one. If grief and losing a parent isn't a trigger of yours, like I feel like everyone needs to read and experience this book. It's so beautiful. You could definitely read this in a few hours. It's a very short book, but it's the type of book that is never, ever, ever going to leave you. Like, it's just so beautiful, and I love it so much. So definitely that book haunted me. I'm never going to forget it. It was just beautiful. Okay, so now moving right along to another romance. So these books came out last year. This is There Are No Saints and There Is No Devil, The Sinner's Duet by Sophie Lark. These are very different from her other romances. I think that I would call these they are dark romances and romances of full emphasis in here. Like, you do get a happily ever after at the end of book too. But I think that the appeal that these had for me was really watching the heroine's journey as she is going through so much in her life and trying to break free from people in her past who have oppressed her. And she does that in a very non-conventional way. She gets involved with these two men who are, you know, at the top of their game, artists, but they are also murderers and psychopaths. And it's just a really, really fascinating case study to sort of see what that experience might even be like. I mean, obviously this is fictional, but it was interesting to me to see Mara, to see how strong she was, even though she had been so mistreated like her whole entire life. And just like, I think she had a complete backbone of steel, and I loved this series. I thought it was fascinating. I loved every single thing about it, and I think that the romance in here is definitely strong, and I think it's probably more present in the second book, but it was just, I mean, if you like thrillers, and if you like murder, mystery, true crime, I don't even know that I would say mystery, there's not really anything mysterious here, but if you like sort of a gritty true crime feel, and you kind of want that fantastical element of characters and a romance in there too, like, I would definitely recommend these. They're unforgettable. Mostly for me, the unforgettable quality of this is Mara, her journey, where she starts out, you know, just really trying to make her way as an artist. She's trying to make a living, and then she joins with Cole, who is one of the, you know, really well-respected, wealthy artists who is also a murderer. And you sort of see her descend to his level, but at the same time, it feels very empowering for her. And I loved it. I think these are fantastic. I think these are, in my opinion, I think these are probably Sophie's best works that she's ever done. Are they the most swoony romantic? Absolutely not. But I think there's just something powerful and really magnetic about reading these, and I enjoyed it. If you like character studies, I would recommend these for sure. Okay, now my next favorite book that haunts me, is actually a series, and I couldn't find my original covers for these books. I have special edition covers, so that's what you get. And I'm going to recommend the whole series, but I'm going to specifically recommend the last book. So this is the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. It's a trilogy of books, and it's basically about a young magician, I guess you could call him a magician, who has a fantastical coat. And when he like flips his coat inside out, he can like travel through worlds. But there is this really big plot, this, you know, basically a big bad guy who is trying to destroy all of the other worlds and come into power. And I'm very much oversimplifying this. And it has characters in here. There is some queer characters in here. There's actually 2 romances in here that do end happily. One is with our heroine, who is a really tough girl who is a little bit, not necessarily villainous, but she's sort of, you know, she's not like your typical heroine who is like a princess or something like that. Like, she is a gritty, fierce young woman who ends up getting you know, caught in a web with Kel, the hero, and they are the ones who actually end up saving the world. But the thing that really like haunts me about this series is the villain origin story of the villain in here. Now, I absolutely love a villain origin story. It's probably one of my favorite things to read or watch in like TV or film or comics or anything. If a villain origin story is really well done, like, that's going to be one of my favorite books forever. Now, if that villain ends up getting redeemed at the end, if he has some type of even if he's not fully redeemed, like to go from completely black to completely white, but watching a villain origin story and then seeing their villain arc and then seeing them sort of have this redemption at the end is one of the most satisfying things for me. And I have very, very, very rarely, if ever, found that in a way that satisfies me other than in this series. This final book, what happens in here with the villain, is one of the most fulfilling and satisfying reading experiences that I have ever had in my life, because not only did he get some redemption, but there was so much that you got of his backstory and why he did what he did and his thought process, and I just absolutely love that so much. And it just made me feel so much empathy, and I love when authors can get me to feel empathy for villainous characters. I think that's what draws me to dark romance so much, and I'm going to talk about that next, actually. But if you like fantasy, I feel like this is a pretty light fantasy. I think this would be very readable for most readers. it's not like heavy world building or a heavy magic system. It's mostly, again, about the characters. If I'm going to recommend a book, it's going to be character driven, and that's exactly what was happening here. But if you want that reading experience of a villain who has like this descent into villainy, so you get to see that, but you also get to see him sort of rise up and out of it. Like one of my favorite books in the Harry Potter series is The Half-Blood Prince, because you get to see Voldemort's origin story in there, and I just love that so much, and I feel like you get that here, and it was just so good. But as opposed to Voldemort, you get to see a bit of redemption here, which was fantastic. So I love the series so much. I've been wanting to reread it for so long, and I think maybe now is the time, actually. Okay, so let's see. What else do I have to talk about? I've talked about all of those. Okay, next, let's talk about dark romance. Okay, so for these books, I picked this series, which I'm not finished with. So this is the Deliver series by Pam Godwin. I have the bind-ups. They're so beautiful. They each contain 3 books in them. The first book so basically, okay, these books are basically about sex trafficking, and the love stories, the romances, these are romances that end in happily ever afters. They're all around people who are involved in that. They're either people who've been taken captive, so they are in sex trafficking, or they are the people who are doing the capturing and putting them into work into the sex trafficking trade. That sounds gross to even say that. And I think that the thing that, again, makes this series specifically a favorite of mine by Pam Godwin, and how it haunts me so much, is how she presents you these characters, you know, the romantic leads, who are villainous. They are completely villainous, but she handles them in a way that no other dark romance author that I've ever read is able to do that, where she creates them to be very, very complex. So they're not just villains. They have a lot of layers. They have a lot of different motivations for why they're doing what they do, why they're doing these bad things. And that's something that I always come back to in fiction, is show me people who do bad things, but who do it maybe because they've been backed into a corner. They feel like they don't have any other option. You know, they're making the best choice out of a bunch of terrible choices. And that's what I think she does best with these books and these characters. And I think that the added element of a romantic relationship in here makes it so much more enjoyable, because you're watching these people fall in love, and you're watching them fall in love with villains, with people who do bad things, who maybe do bad things to the heroine specifically, or the hero, you know, as is the case in Deliver, the first book. And it's just fascinating and haunting. And there are moments in each of these books that have stayed in my mind that show this very small, intimate moment between the two of them. And it's almost like it's this shifting moment between violence and maybe evilness towards a little bit of light and a little bit of goodness. So I think that if you love a villain romance and you're okay with the content in here, like, these are full of every trigger warning you could think of as far as like sexual assault and all kinds of things like that, I would highly recommend these, because these really explore villains and why they do what they do, and maybe why they got to the place they are, and is there a way for them to come back. And that's something that I feel like again, that's a theme that I really like seeing in books, is seeing someone who is pegged as a villain, or someone who has done bad things, and then I want to see them get redeemed, right? Because every human on this planet has done something that they regret. They've made bad choices. They've made wrong decisions, and it's hurt people. But then inevitably, because we're human, we want to do what's right. We want to do good things. And so finding that moment when these villains have that spark of light where they think, you know what, I could come back and change my life and do things better. I just love that so much. And that is something that Pam Godwin gets so right in these books. I just absolutely adore it. I think she's a fantastic author. She gets chemistry right, she gets heat right, she gets all of those things right. But what will always draw me to her is how she plays with that concept of good versus evil, and what makes an evil person and what makes a good person, and is there a way to come back once you've made some really bad choices. So I feel like that may be an unpopular opinion, but that is what some of my favorite books are. Like, all of these books that I'm talking about are my favorite books, and they all have a very, very, very gray hero characters. These characters do bad things, but that's what makes me really enjoy reading about them, is because they're complicated, they're complex, they're conflicted, they're doing these things not because they want to just be evil, but because they feel like this is their only option, or they feel like this is the best option, even if that means causing pain to others. So anyway, I find that to be just endlessly fascinating, and that's what keeps me coming back to Pam Godwin, and that is what will always make me a fan of her, is how she deals with that specifically. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about is Wolfsong by T.J. Klune. So this is an MM romance. It is a werewolf shifter romance, but I think that to just peg it as a werewolf romance isn't really talking about what this book is actually about. That's sort of like a plot point that causes these other things to happen, and it is a huge part of what creates this found family aspect in here because of that pack relationship that they have. But this book is essentially about two boys who met as kids. There was an age gap. They were just friends for very many years. The hero, Ox, has lost, his father walked out on him. He has a really sort of a damaged childhood, some trauma that's happened to him, and he finds this wolf pack family who moved into town, and he bonds with the youngest boy. They have like this instant bond. There's fated mates concepts in here too. But this book is a book that has just sunk so deep into my brain and my heart, and I just can never forget about it. And it is all about Ox, the boy who's human, how he found love with this found family. It's about grief, the grief that he experiences as he loses people along the way, as he tries to come to terms with, feeling like self-worth again after the abuse that his father put him through. And his whole life in this book is just full of tragedy, but also it's like side by side with hope and love and joy. And the moments in here that I love the most are deeply romantic, but they are also right after or right next to some tragedy that happens. And I just think that T.J. Klune is such a gifted author at writing about emotions and characters going through things. And I think that he does this in a way that is a little bit lighthearted too, like in The House in the Cerulean Sea. That book feels much more lighthearted than this book does, but he handles those same feelings so well in his characters, where he's dealing with these characters who maybe have a bit of melancholy or have some things that they're working through, but there's always like this character who never stops reaching for hope or never stops trying to find a person to connect with in a loving way or a friend way, and I just love that so much. But Ox and Joe, this couple, if ever I were to do a video about soulmates, they would definitely be on there, because they truly do feel like soulmates, and their love was just amazing and unbelievable, and I just adored it so much. So this book, candy canes, peppermint and pine cones, candy canes and pine cones, that's what Joe says Ox smells like. It's so beautiful. I love this book so much, and I always will. So, all right, those are the books that I have to talk about today. These are all books. Oh, wait, I forgot. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot my favorite book. Okay, I have two last books on here. Wow, I'm talking so much. Okay, so another book that is haunting, that is probably one of my favorite books of all time, is Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. This is basically a retelling in a modern sort of way of Koschei the Deathless. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I looked it up. But Koschei the Deathless, who is a figure in Russian mythology, and Maria Morevna, who is a human woman who he sort of like kidnaps from modern day life and takes her back to his kingdom. There's this battle between him and this other Russian figure, mythological figure. And it's really, I think this book is a little bit odd. It's a little bit strange. The writing is absolutely stunning. Like, stunning. But the thing that makes this book haunting is the very dysfunctional relationship that Maria and Koschei have. And I think that it works for me because it doesn't necessarily end in a happily ever after, but this feels almost like an obsession that the two of them have towards one another, and sort of this like fated nature of continuously circling back, and even when she tries to break free, she ends up coming back to him. And this book is definitely messed up, but it was just fascinating to me. And I think that the few quotes in here that you hear from Koschei when he's talking about how he thinks about Maria, or what he feels for her, how he's trying to put like human emotions and feelings to what he, as this very mythical figure, has maybe never felt before or put into words was just fascinating. And like, I have Pinterest boards just full of like Tumblr art of this book because it's haunting watching how he is obsessed with her and he wants to love her like a human man would, but he finds himself to be like incapable of that. And so their relationship therefore ends up being very dysfunctional. It's just fascinating, and I adored every single page of this. When I finished it, like, I felt unsettled, but also like, wow, I have truly never read a book like that. Like, literally, I have never read a book like this. It's one of my favorites, and it, again, like, it's a bit odd, it's a bit strange, and the writing is beautiful, but it's also like very symbolic too, so it can be a little bit difficult to get into, but like, I'll never forget this book. It's fantastic, I think. I think it's absolutely stunning. Stunning. Okay, and the last book, which is also probably one of my favorite books of all time, is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This book, oh my gosh. So I picked this book up and I wasn't quite sure. I'd never read Cormac McCarthy before. I had very high expectations for the writing in this book, which were absolutely met. Like, the writing in this book is so stunning. Like, when I talk about an author who uses like a lot of brevity in their word choice, but uses words that have a lot of power, like, that is Cormac McCarthy to a T. This book is powerful and haunting. It's basically a dystopian world where this father and son are trying to survive. They're trying to make it to the coast, and hopefully they're going to find either people who are surviving there or more livable conditions because the world is burned to ashes. So it's a little bit like The Walking Dead in that way, but it's also is in there walking through this world trying to keep each other safe from the other humans that are out there that are absolutely not above like murdering and eating people. But it never really ever hits a slasher type of feel. Even though you're dealing with something that could be like horror film fodder, it's very introspective. We're looking at this father and how he is trying so hard to do everything in his power to keep his son safe, while at the same time not descending to the level of the other people who are out there who are going to kill, hurt, destroy, rape, eat anyone they come across to survive. Like, the dad is trying very hard to protect his son and shield him from that type of life because he wants to raise him to be good. Meanwhile, the father is dying throughout the whole book, and so he's also wondering, like, am I going to be here to protect him? Am I going to be here to raise him? Is he going to end up being like these other people that we've just walked past, that we've tried to hide from and hold our breath so that they don't hunt us? Like, this book is fantastic. I love it so freaking much. It's definitely one of those books that you only need to read once, and then you don't need to experience it ever again, but it's never, ever, ever going to leave you. Like, seriously, this is another one of just, if you can deal with sort of the heavy subject matter, this book is fantastic, and I think everyone should read it, because when I talk about my favorite books, I want books that help me to feel what it's like to be human, like, that give me hope for the human experience. That's exactly what's happening here. Even though a lot of this is dark, there's still like a very, very brief but bright glimmer of hope, and I just love it so much. So, okay, now for real, I'm done. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know this is a little bit different from my usual content, but these are some books that I've loved for a long time that I've been wanting to talk about, and I just thought, you know what better time than now than to talk about books that haunt me right before Halloween. So thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, please leave me a black heart if you want to. Let me know you were here, and yeah. Also, feel free to let me know any books that have haunted you in the comments below. I would love to know that. And I'll see y'all in my next video.